Hello, and welcome to this artificial intelligence edition of the Purple Journal podcast. I am your host, Joe Johnson, soon to be replaced by JoeBot 3.0. I am the owner.
I'm JoeBot 3.0.
Emojis everywhere. I am the owner.
In case you couldn't tell, we had a conversation about robots before.
There you go. You got to put those seeds in people's minds.
Yes.
Get them thinking. It gets them interested.
Well, we need to really get used to robots because our quarterback is one.
Hey.
Wow!
This has been my bit on Twitter for weeks. This is not. He's a Westworld host, programmed to be a quarterback.
The question is, what level quarterback is he programmed to be?
I feel like everything about him is programmed to be as forgettable as possible.
Nice.
He said hi to me the other day. I said hi to him. He's awesome. What are you talking about?
Nah, yeah, he seems like a super nice guy. Like, his pressers are so like, they're so well politicked and so agenty, and like his whole brand is so manufactured that it's just, it's like, I have yet to see anything about him that passes the Turing test for me.
Oh.
It'll be interesting to see if writers, the reporters start trying to get something, less static, less, polished, as you said, out of him, because he is. He's got it. He's got the patter down, boy. He's got that $1 million smile, and he's had all these answers before. He knows what he's doing. He's been around.
There's two things to take away from that. One is that Luke is going to be at training camp tomorrow doing that Blade Runner test where they zoom in on the eyeball. Asking questions on Cousins.
I was super tempted to ask because he did a presser on Wednesday, and I was super tempted to just be like, so what's it like, trying to assimilate with humans?
What's it like, hanging out with Mark
I'll give you
Zuckerberg?
$1 if you ask him that. I'll give you.
Oh yeah, I'll get thrown out on my butt.
He's the Zuckerberg of the Vikings. I was gonna say, and two. I love how Luke's been at camp for a handful of days and he's already the grizzled old. He's like
Yeah, it comes right out of the gate with the shot at the QB. I love it.
What was that lady's name that was in the White House presser room? Helen something. That asked all the hard questions. That's Luke now. But anyway, I own Purple PTSD and Vikings territory. Talk about a segue. I'm here with Joe Oberly, who writes for Vikings Territory, Purple PTSD, and the Sports Post, as well as Luke Braun, who writes for the same and also is the co-host of the Pocket Protectors podcast. And I do find it interesting that a guy who's labeled as an analytical mind is making those connections. I think there's some validity there. But how are you guys doing? Obviously, we've Luke's in town, so we know he exists.
That doesn't look like anything to me.
Yes, they didn't send us Luke Bot 2.0. Right? We got the real Luke, so he's here. I saw him.
He's escaped his old.
I left Luke Bot in L.A.
Hanging out at camp, you guys got to meet one another. I wasn't there yet because I had some commitments in regards to the end of the month, but I should be there soon. We also weren't expecting to have as much access as we were provided, so. That's pretty cool.
Don't say that out loud. Don't say that out loud.
I was talking about. I can't think of a. Anyway, so first things first. I guess we should talk to Luke, who had his first impressions of the new digs out in Egan. I was there. We kind of talked about it last week, so I can chime in a little bit on my experience and perspective of the place. What'd you think, man? How was your first day out there? How's your week been? Has it been as cool as everyone expected it to be?
Yeah, it's been an awesome experience. Just getting being that close to the action and being like that kind of intimately involved in it is definitely a new thing for me because I didn't go to journalism school. I didn't, this is kind of a more official capacity than I've ever really been able to get, which is an amazing opportunity because I get a chance to really show what I can do with those kinds of resources and the stories that I can create. So, I've kind of been focusing just like I did in my writing over the last, 3 months writing that series. I've been focusing on some of the the lesser known players and some of the guys with long shot stories, and everybody has interesting stories to tell. So I've been I wrote a story about Antoine Williams, who a lot of people probably haven't even heard of, but he's one of our linebackers. He got cut from Detroit for not being good enough at special teams, even though they drafted him in the 5th round, and now he's trying to improve on that and kind of having another chance to make the roster as a linebacker or on special teams. But they thought he could start in Detroit.
You surprised Prefer with the question about.
Yeah, he was not expecting to talk about Antoine freaking Williams in his press conference about where everybody else is asking about the kickers and what's Mike Hughes doing and is Cheryl's going to make the team, and I'm like, hey, you want to talk about Antoine Williams?
Like what did you ask him, and what did he say?
Well, I asked him about how's Antoine Williams looking in terms of special teams, and he kind of gave me for a brief instant a look of like, what? Like, what do you... And then he was like, ooh, that's a good question. And then he gave me an answer. He said he came from Detroit with some bad habits, and more of his quotes in the article that I wrote about him. But I've been kind of focusing on those players, and otherwise I've had a really interesting time being able to kind of get up close to even the walkthroughs, but in practice too, just what they've decided to spend their time on. And in terms of, the route combinations that they've decided to spend their time on, which I won't say in public, in a public setting, but, the fact that, they've been spending a lot of time doing red zone stuff, and they've been spending a lot of time doing special team stuff compared to, what you would expect. You would expect a team to kind of practice just enough special teams to get it down, but they're spending, a lot of time. They go there, do special teams drills, 3 or 4 times a day in a 3-hour practice. So those kind of insights I've found really interesting, and then just being able to evaluate the roster bubble players and just watch the position battles develop. It's been really, really fun watching Holton Hill and Marcus Sherrills go at it for what's probably a roster spot they're competing over. And, they both are really, really showing out. So it's really, really fun to watch that. It's been fun to, see Kirk Cousins up close. He's our $84 million man, our exciting guy. And he, for the most part, I thought he struggled yesterday with some blitz stuff, but for the most part, he's extremely accurate and looks as good as you'd expect him to look in a practice setting.
But it's fun to see. You got the ultimate code word for I hadn't thought about that when Prefer said, good question.
I could totally tell that he was like, who and why would he at all think about answering, Antoine Williams, who's probably going to get cut.
Have you when you've gone up and talked to some of these guys? I mean, I know we're going to talk about your what's it like being undrafted, but I mean, it's always funny. You see when you're at the deal, you see the scrums that when the big guy comes off and he's going to talk, and every camera crew and outlet in town crowds around him, and a bunch of writers and what have you, because they have to get those quotes. But there's these other guys walking past that even some of them might not want to stop and talk, but some of them never really get the chance. But some of the guys you're talking to, are they surprised that all of a sudden, oh, you want to talk to me? Oh, okay. I've had some of those in the past. It's kind of fun.
Definitely, yeah. I think I talked to Josh Andrews for the undrafted story, and he was really, really ready to tell his story. He was very proud of the fact that as an undrafted free agent, he's been in the league for 4 years, and he was ready to And I asked him about it, and that's what I wanted out of him. So I asked him, I was like, hey, you've been in the league for a long time as an undrafted free agent. What's it like? And he was definitely really, really excited to, get his message out there.
Those interviews are so much better than someone who's got to go every week and every day and gets the same questions. And, I just remember Cordero Patterson just saying, you better have something new for me. And I do, and it's like, I did, and he was surprised, he was impressed. But those guys, they do want to talk. They're such great interviewers. They'll sit there and they'll answer as much as you have questions. So that's fun. Good for you.
I'm so glad that you asked that question. That was going to be my question almost word for word for the undrafted piece, because I noticed that too the day that I was out there. Maybe it's because I've been reading a lot of Luke's stuff and kind of have a special spot in my heart for some of these guys, but there was 2 or 3 guys the day I was there, because it was a rookie day that people were talking to, and you could kind of just see the rest of the guys walking by. I don't think their heads were hung low, but in that context of reading those stories, I was like, God, it'd be so cool if someone ran up and talked to that guy. So that's just,
That shows you what us media lemmings are. We're all just a bunch of lemmings. What's the big story? And it's sometimes it's dictated by their outlet that says, "Oh, we got to have that quote." But
exactly.
The fun stuff is what Luke is doing.
It was interesting too, real quickly, just because I came home from that, and I was in the scrum with Simeon and someone else, and so I turned on the news to see if I could see myself, and you see on every channel basically the same interviews or questions from different angles from the people that were there. So it seems like, to plug your stuff even more, that you're kind of getting stories that most places aren't. Obviously.
Right, and I think that's a testament to the way we do things at these two websites. Is like, you don't give me, okay, you have to get a Simeon story out today, or okay, everybody has to get a Diggs story out today. Well, everybody was scrambling to get their Diggs story out and get their interview with Diggs and get the scrum with Spielman and ask about Diggs and stuff. I was able to go research something that's a little off the beaten path. That it's like I was able to kind of take a road with less traffic. And I think that, like, the way we do things here, where it's just, you just trust that something interesting will come out and it doesn't necessarily have to be something, taking that restriction away allows me to, go hunt down something that is maybe a lesser known name, but is something that you're not going to be able to get anywhere else, because they're all forced to, write their 11,000th story about Kirk Cousins.
And they smile when you talk to them. You made their day,
Yeah. I think I got some really real stuff from, I talked to Mike Needham the first day I was there, and I talked to Trey Matthews, the two undrafted rookies, and I put quotes from them in that undrafted story, and they really seemed to kind of loosen up, especially after I asked them something about their background. Yeah. And I know all their backgrounds from doing the 90-man series, so I was able to say, oh, hey, Mike, you did a mission. Tell me about what it was like to come back to football. And then I think that kind of is a signal that, like, I'm here in good faith to really talk to you about your story.
Right.
You're not going to do the gotcha thing that your agent made you scared of.
Yeah, totally.
And that I know who you are, and I'm not just here to ask some random whoever, something for a story. I'm actually writing about Anthony Barr. I'm here to talk to you about you. And I think that, it helps them feel a little bit more comfortable, and you could really feel them kind of loosen up and give me something a little bit less platitude. You can tell which answers they rehearsed with their agent and which ones they didn't.
Yeah, that's cool. That's awesome.
And talking about going off the unbeaten path, it was good timing for you to write your piece about Diggs. Came out like hours before.
That was really lucky.
the news came out about his contract. So, I mean, if you want to describe what your piece was about him, and then we can kind of segue into the news about his riches.
Yeah, so I had kind of noticed that Diggs' energy, just being the first day and just watching it, everybody followed Diggs' energy. And Diggs would come out, he's the only guy jogging out on the field, and then the next day I saw two other guys jog on the field. And even the stupid, he's wearing shorts, and now other people are wearing them, and everybody follows Diggs' lead, so I wanted to look at that. And I asked him in his presser, the one before he signed the contract, he did a presser the day before he signed his contract. And I just asked him, hey, what advice do you have for the rookies? And he went off into a whole thing, and it was just a lot of great advice. You can read that in the article. But then I also talked to a couple of the undrafted rookies, Jeff Bidet and Corey Robertson, about, hey, do you ask Diggs for advice? Does he give you advice? And with everybody that I've talked to, even guys that I talked to for another reason, but like Diggs came up or whatever, they all say that like Diggs is always there, and he's always willing to lend an ear, and he's always willing to give advice. There's nobody on the team that's like not worth his time. He will take his time to help you through something, help you with a technique, give you advice.
What a dude.
And I think, that kind of, I don't think that was ever untrue of him, but I think once you've become the superstar of the team, which he was before the miracle, but the miracle really cemented it, that you kind of get that you have to be a leader now. You're kind of the face of the franchise nationally. When they think Vikings, they think of Diggs and that catch. So you kind of have to be the leader. Everybody who's coming to the team, you're the most recognizable guy to them, and they're going to look up to you. And he has to lead not only by example, but by engaging with the people in his room and helping these young guys come along. And everybody I talked to about that said he's doing just that. It's really awesome.
That's why they signed him. I mean, in addition to everything else, that's another thing. They like leaders. They like guys who are going to set example in the locker rooms for the younger players, and to lock up somebody for another 5 years contract? 5-year contract?
Yeah.
And that's great news for for them, that's just what they're looking for.
And Joe, is that something you've noticed as someone who gets to obviously go to the games, and you've been around the team, closer to the team than we have over the past few years? Is that something has emerged more recently, or that's the first? And the second part of the question, and you guys can both go off on this, is how does that work in conjunction with Thielen, considering they're the 1A and 1B guys on this team, and the leading receiver duo in the NFL?
That's a good question, to quote Mike Remmers.
Hey, I did one.
I do believe it's something that has been emerging. I mean, from day one, he showed his stuff, and he started to get attention in the locker room, and he was a stand-up guy. He as opposed to someone like Trey Waynes, who has been very reticent his entire career. From day one, Diggs would give you the time he needed, and you could see he was a little nervous, early on, but you have seen a growth with him, and whereas he got more and more attention, and they kind of had to protect him a little bit, but he was always a decent guy that would say hi and look you in the eye as you're walking by, even if you couldn't talk to you, because some of the guys that don't want to talk to you will avoid you at all costs and go the other way. But so yeah, I would say he is really growing into it, and now, as Luke said, he's cemented as one of the leaders on this team, and he's not that old, which is kind of interesting. But to talk about Thielen, that's another guy who's ascended from way down to quite a leadership role, at least around. I mean, I just saw before I got on here, PFF said that the Vikings have the best receiving core in the league.
That's where I got that from, yeah.
Yeah, I don't. He signed his contract last year, and everybody talks about the numbers, and Diggs still hasn't matched some of the numbers that Thielen has on some things, but he's surpassed him in others. So I don't think there's any sibling rivalry there, any jealousy one way or the other. I think Thielen knows if he keeps just doing what he's doing, that he'll get his, and he's that kind of a guy that is a grinder, is a hard worker. So I don't think it will cause any problems. It'll be fun to watch if something happens there, but I don't see that happening personally.
Yeah, I wouldn't blame Thielen if he decided, I'm going to hold out because I'm ridiculously underpaid, because he's ridiculously underpaid.
Yeah.
But he's got 3 years left on his deal, which means he doesn't have a lot of leverage. The Vikings can just say no, and there's not really much he could do about it outside of holding out. And I don't think Thielen's the kind of guy that would really do that just for the money. He just seems like the kind of guy who's just happy to play football and.
Right.
Well, it doesn't hurt. He's on his favorite team ever, too.
Yeah, he's on his hometown team, living out his dream, and he's ultimately still making millions. He's just making fewer millions.
I don't see him holding out. I do see his agent make an overture to the Vikings after next year and say, hey, can we do anything here? And it will be
with 2 years left on his deal, I could see it. Them saying. But right now he's got 3 years left on his deal. He has no leverage, and when that deal is up, he'll be 29, I think. So he kind of got himself in a rough situation when he signed this deal, which we knew was a great deal for the team when he signed, which conversely is a bad deal for Thielen. But he was also we weren't really sure if he was a flash in the pan or not. He took so long to come along that he wasted his kind of young prime years. Not wasted, but he took his young prime years to get there. And then when he was in the prime of his career, he didn't exactly have the accolades that Diggs has to really leverage himself into a market value premier contract.
Right.
So that's how this got here. And if Thielen did decide to, make a big stink about it, I wouldn't blame him. He's ridiculously underpaid. It's only fair that he gets what he deserves. But right now, he's not in a situation where he's got really much to work with in terms of negotiating tools. So it doesn't behoove him to do this right now. It behooves him to wait a year or two until his contract is closer to coming up, and then he says, hey, I want an extension and I want to make more money.
It'll be interesting.
That makes a lot more sense.
It'll be interesting to see what happens this year in this whole dynamic, because you make a good point that it's come along more so. The guy was undrafted. He started out on the practice squad for 2 seasons before he got going, and so he is a rags to riches type guy. So I mean, he's been patient all along. He's been patient when he went from high school to MSU Mankato and getting a $500 scholarship. He's been patient from then not getting drafted, getting here. So I think he will be patient. But if he markedly outplays Diggs and becomes favorite target of Cousins this year, that things could change. I don't see him being a holdout type guy, but it'll be fun to watch because Diggs did sign such a good contract. But the Vikings are pretty good at doing this. My bigger concern is what they're going to do with Anthony Barr.
Yeah, that's a good. We can get in kind of to this. I wanted you guys' thoughts on like the numbers that Diggs got, the guaranteed money, what that means for other receivers, what that means for Barr. So let's talk about Barr really quickly, because he seems obviously to be the last piece to lock up this core. And I saw a tweet from somebody that just, it's in your head, but you don't really think about it. And Luke, you've been a big proponent of the fact that, if the Vikings don't win this year, they're not like you said this last week, they're not in like a one-off 2009 situation where they need to win or it's over. Everyone's either going to leave or they're old. But it has been amazing, just to take what Joe said, what they've been able to do to get these guys all under contract. And so, what do you guys think about what this means for Barr, Joe? Like, obviously that's the final piece, and
I don't know. It's interesting for him with what they're kind of not. I won't say changing his what the word is, his focus is. They're not changing his position, but they're really having him work a lot with the D linemen to improve his skills there. So I guess I don't see them doing that and spending a lot of time on that if they don't see that as maybe something they really want to build and construct with him. So
do you mean in regards to his contract?
No, I guess I'm talking about building his skills and, having him, become a better, edge rusher, because he's been working with the linemen. And I just think if they don't see him as part of their future, I don't know if you would spend all that time and effort on doing that. Yeah. But so I think they'll get it done. I it is one guy at a time is kind of the way they're doing it. And I hope they get something done because I think he's crucial. And we've already got, some uncertainty at linebacker, just a little bit as far as depth goes. And so I think, Zimmer's not going to, no matter what he said about him in the past, he's not going to want to let a talent like this go. So I know they want to get it done, but I don't know the numbers, how Brzezinski does it. So I get a little nervous when all these other guys come in with these great, huge contracts, and you got this guy sitting out there who's a huge part of that defense.
Yeah, with Diggs' contract, the guarantees, I think he's got like 16.9 guaranteed at signing, which is a $15 million signing bonus, and then this year's salary, which is only $1.9 million because he's a fifth-round rookie. So that's a lower guarantee than I was anticipating for sure. I know he has 40 total guarantees, but I think those are injury guarantees. I could be wrong about that. The details of the contract aren't completely out yet.
They got injury guarantees. They got to be with this guy.
Well, injury guarantees are just all that means is that money kicks in if he misses out on the whole season or goes on IR, which hasn't happened. I think he has play game incentives. He has $9 million in incentives, so it's 72 is the total value as it stands against the cap right now. But could get to 81 if he hits his incentives. I don't know what those incentives are, but I know that it sounds like they count as quote unquote not likely to be earned incentives, which means there's stuff he hasn't done in years past. So that could be 1,000 yards, could be 100 catches, could play all 16 games, all things he hasn't done, but is reasonably likely to do. So that's kind of how it breaks down. But I think if the $40 million isn't injury guarantee and it's just regular guarantee, then it makes a lot of sense why he would sign, a thing that could be 72 but could be 81. Basically, if he turns out to be as good as we all think / know he is, he's going to make Brandon Cooks money, and if not, he makes a little less than Jarvis Landry money. And I think the former scenario where he makes all the money is a lot more likely. And in terms of Barr, I know Rick Spielman said that there wasn't like a snag in the negotiation with Diggs, that there wasn't some impasse that they were at all this time while we were waiting. They were just going through the process, and the process just took longer than we as fans knew. Like, we didn't know what was going on, but they were, just progressing and going through the process. And now they go through the process with Barr, and that'll take as long as it takes, but I'm sure it'll get done well before it becomes an issue. They've been so emphatic about, no, we're not picking between Diggs and Barr. We're getting Diggs and we're getting Barr, and that's important. I want to see the year-by-year structure for Diggs. Specifically, how much is his cap number in 2019? As it stands right now, I think on over the cap, we have like $17 million in cap space in 2019. So with the $14 million average, obviously that'd be a huge problem for getting Barr done. But if you take a lower amount in 2019 and then backload the rest of the money and spread it across the rest of the years, which is kind of how they did things with Kendricks, then you can kind of make room for Barr and do the same thing with Barr and make room for everybody. And then you just next year during free agency, you don't do much, which shouldn't be a problem.
And Luke, you said you think they'll get things done with Barr before it becomes a problem. When do you think that time is? Like, when would it become a problem? Is that before the season starts, or?
No, I think because I don't think a lot of these players aren't thinking about their contracts at all. They're letting their agents handle things. So they sign a contract week 7. It's not like they were really thinking about that from weeks 1 to 6. But I think it would become a problem after the season, and then you're sitting there going, well, now Barr is weighing this against free agency and how much money he'd make in free agency, then suddenly that starts to change the numbers and it becomes an issue. Right now, he's not weighing this against free agency. He's probably been told, you are going to be signed. I have a kind of crackpot theory that he was told before OTAs started, hey, we want to sign you, we're going to extend you, but we're going to do the other 3 first. So just letting you know that we're not going to get to you until later. And he said, okay, I'm going to take out an insurance policy.
That's not a crackpot. I think there's something to that because he missed that day and he called Zimmer and told him why. And
he's been super open with both parties have been open with each other about it.
They had a discussion. Whatever it was, we don't know. But there's got to be something there because there's not been word one about it since. And he's been a good soldier, and I think it will get done. You're probably right. It's just to hear Spielman say that we're just going through the process and they'll get it done. I don't think you'll see anybody. They all know what's at stake this year, and god dang, they win. If he's smart, maybe they win a Super Bowl and he's a stud, and then he's really got some leverage next year, so to go anywhere he wants. But hopefully it doesn't get to that.
No, I don't think it'll get too far into the season because if you're Barr's agent, you say, okay, yeah, we both parties definitely want to get a deal done, and we're just hammering out the numbers and trying to come to a middle ground. Barr's not going to say, okay, but what about free agency? He's going to say, oh, cool, okay, let me know when there's a number. And then week 2 there's a number, and then we get to talk about it and start hammering out details. But I think in these...
Some guys, I say, once the season starts, they don't want to hear a damn thing about the contract. They just want to play. But, yeah, it could. Right. It still could happen that way.
And I think it seems like in these kind of things, there's a handshake earlier in the process where they say, okay, cool, base number's going to be around here somewhere, and then it takes 4 weeks to figure out the details because there's so many complexities to it, and how much is an incentive, and how much is going to be guaranteed, and there's just a lot of steps to it, and it takes a while, and obviously we don't hear about any of that, so it looks to us like, oh no, another day went by without Diggs signing, nothing's getting done, they're at an impasse, and we start panicking. And in reality, it's just there's a lot of crap to hammer out. These contracts are really detailed and huge.
We don't always aren't in total touch with reality when we're talking about Vikings and concerned about Vikings.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, people thought we were going to lose them to the Packers.
That's my entire MO, just destroy right there. I got nothing. Goodbye. I wanted to also touch on something before we get into some other stuff from camp and some of the articles you guys wrote that wasn't on the agenda. I tend to do that once or twice a week just because my other MO that I have to switch to and latch on to now is the wide receiver position that I love so much. And obviously we've been talking about Treadwell almost every single week on this show. A lot of news coming out of OTAs and getting a lot of attention. And then now with this past couple days of camp, I've seen some tweets out there talking about Treadwell, how great he's doing, how he's overcome some quote-unquote off-the-field issues and he can focus on football. And, there's always those little things that come with Treadwell, overcoming injury. It's a big
weekend for a former Vikings wide receiver, too.
Oh, yeah. Michael Floyd got signed. Hope he makes the team.
No, Randy Moss. Anyway, go ahead, Joe.
No, you said Randy Moss, and I got all doughy-eyed.
Yeah.
No, I just wanted to see what you guys thought of what you saw from Treadwell this week and how he's working with Cousins, and if you think that they might be working him to the offense more than they had in the past.
I think the most important information is that he's been with the ones pretty much exclusively, and it doesn't look like they're even really considering changing that. On Tuesday, he had a pretty explosive day. Did really well in red zone drill. Did really well in some one-on-ones against the DBs. Otherwise, he's just kind of been, doing his job, throwing what's coming at, catching what's thrown at him.
He had a great red zone catch. He had a great red zone catch on Monday.
I saw that on Twitter. Yeah.
Oh, it was Monday. Yeah, that's what I. Yeah.
That was
you and I, we were standing right there for it.
Exactly.
It was awesome. So, and that was a really good day for him. And I think, while it doesn't make a huge difference, what?
Jesus.
It doesn't make a huge difference right now. Like, it's not like, oh, he did great in his 7-on-7 drill in camp. Doesn't tell us whether or not he's better. It tells us very little about that. But what it does do is decide, like, they're determining who gets reps with what teams based on these processes. So it kind of solidifies him as he's going to keep getting first team reps because he had that good day. And that's kind of the first step to proving that to getting the opportunity to prove that he actually is better. If he is better, this is what that has to look like.
Mm.
Yeah, well, he's doing what he needs to do to get what he wants so far. As camp progresses along and they do more hitting and they do more, they get down and dirty, which they still haven't yet. They have to see it continue because part of his deal is separating and making catches, and we'll see in short red zone stuff. It's one thing, but to see him out there in the middle of the field in traffic and see how he does out there, it'll be another thing to look at. So
I wanted to touch on.
I will say,
oh yeah,
I talked a lot about in the off season when we hired John DiFilippo. I talked a lot about his whole face mask or hire thing in the red zone, and that has been very apparent in camp. Everything that isn't thrown like at the goal line, like a check down that then they try to punch in. Everything is face mask or higher or back shoulder, which makes it nearly impossible for defensive backs to get a hand on it. Kind of the old, like, Larry Fitzgerald's always open 4 feet above his head. It's that principle, and that has borne out. They're doing that.
And you touched on something earlier too, Luke, that I wanted to ask you about before we transition. Just because like I said, I wasn't able to make it out to camp earlier this week, and so I was kind of living vicariously through people's Twitter feeds, and I saw a lot of stuff that said, like, Kirk Cousins 7 for 7 on this, or maybe he missed a deep pass to Diggs, but Diggs was wide open. But otherwise, there was a lot of praise for what Cousins was doing from the Twitter feeds I saw, and I know you mentioned that he seemed to struggle a little bit against the blitz, and so I wanted to see if you could just expand on that from your perspective, and Joe too, obviously, just because that's obviously a concern that we've had these past few months.
Yeah, for the most part, especially in the drills, just the wide receiver defensive back drills, which are really for the wide receiver, but the quarterback is also practicing his throws. They're pretty much on the money every time, with 1 or 2 exceptions. I thought that yesterday, which is Tuesday, whenever you're listening to this, they threw a bunch of defensive back blitzes at him, and it was kind of a blitz day for the defense. The defense did a lot of practicing of their various blitz packages and stuff, so they threw some. Newman blitzed him once, and I think Mike Hughes, or maybe Mackenzie Alexander or someone blitzed him once. And those plays, Newman swatted one away. He threw a really bad interception under pressure once. Like, those plays, he just seemed to be having an off day. But it was only one day, and again, this is camp. This is not where we make evaluations. But it seems like what we knew about him, which is clean pocket Kirk Cousins, is awesome. We knew that, and that's not very disputable. Seems to be bearing out.
Mm.
He's also going against a pretty good defense.
Yeah, that's an interesting caveat, obviously. I mean, going against them every day, that's been talked about in the media a lot. Should help out in that regard. But what scares me, and what has obviously been my point of panic, outside of my inability to train a dog, apparently, is the Vikings' offensive line.
It's a homey feel.
Yeah, we got feedback this week. I told Joe about it at camp. People like when we make mistakes and own up to them. So there you go. That one's for you, Roger. But yeah, Remmers obviously is a kind of little scary moment where he got injured, I think on Tuesday, and he was seen in a walking boot after practice, so yesterday. Did you guys see what happened? And I know that I was looking at some of the news before we got on the air, and they said he'll be ready for week 1, which means it's got to be a sprain of some kind that's going to hold him up for the duration of camp, which is started the articles already. That I think it was a fan-sided article that I read right before I called you guys that said, "Is there time to worry about the Vikings offensive line? With the Sperano thing and the." All right, so I'm not going to write that article. Delete. I'm kidding. But, yeah, obviously there's a little bit of fear there. I think Hill was out just because he was sick or something. But what happened with Remmers?
Dysentery or something. He's been out for 3 days with the flu.
Was he playing Oregon Trail?
Starting right tackle, Brian, what the heck's his name, the rookie?
Oh, yeah, Brian O'Neill getting a lot of first-team reps, which is good for him at this stage.
Well, that's interesting too. So if you guys want to talk a little bit about what you saw from Remmers, if you saw him get injured, or just thoughts on that, and then O'Neill.
Luke, so go ahead, Luke. What did you see?
Yeah, I didn't see him on the play because he was in the middle, but I know that Luke Inman, if you go to Luke_Spinman on Twitter, got a video of that play. It looked kind of really hard to see because it was a goal line play and there was a huge crowd and he was kind of behind a couple people. Kind of looks like someone just rolled up on his ankle weird, but he then came off the field. He limped right by me and Courtney Cronin, and then he came back out in a walking boot, and apparently he's still in a walking boot today. But Courtney Cronin, great beat writer that she is, got a source report that it seems like the kind of thing that if it were the regular season, he'd probably miss a week or two. But since it's preseason and he's a 7th-year vet, they're not going to rush him back. He'll probably miss a bunch of preseason games, and we're going to panic about it. But ultimately, he'll be good to go. It doesn't sound like anything broke. It doesn't sound like he'll need surgery or anything like that. They're just going to roll with getting more backups in, and that'll be really interesting because right now we have a kind of 3-way guard battle for a roster spot between Tom Compton, Danny Isidora, and Colby Cassette. And Colby Cassette then stuck with the 3s. But with Remmers out of the way, he might actually be able to work his way up into the 2s. If he plays well, work his way into the rotation, fighting for that roster spot.
Yeah, and I was going to ask, too, then, from the sound of the play, were they pretty much running Remmers as the guard? I know that on the last show...
he was right guard.
Yeah.
He's going to move inside. Anytime they split the offensive, because, they've got 2 offensive line coaches now with Perone and Janoko, and they would split it often. Tackles go with one coach and interior line go with another coach, and Remmers was always with the interior line. So he's not going to move back out to tackle. They seem to have made that decision.
It was interesting, too, because we just talked about this on the show, and then the news came out, 48 hours later, and about the decision as to who they hired for the offensive line.
Yeah, we were all right.
It was interesting, though, that they apparently did reach out to Mike Tice, but they couldn't get it done, I think was the quote. It seems,
Serious?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was Rappaport. That's real.
Yeah. And so, obviously the take I had was, keep the guys that have been with this team because it's such a horrible situation that you kind of want somebody that's been with these guys because it's not just a huge difference from what Sperano was doing. And bringing in Tice obviously would be completely different. But I found that to be, interesting. I know Tice obviously has a bad reputation for most Vikings fans, but he was considered one of the best offensive line coaches the team has ever had. So he's good at it. I just thought it was interesting that they, not only went that way, but that the phrasing was couldn't get it done, as in they actually gave him a deal, not just tested the waters. So
what sadness for bunnies over in St. Louis Park, his favorite watering hole.
Is that where he used to get sauced?
Notoriously, he'd go there after every game. The fans would go out there just to see Mike Tice come in and have some beers. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's not a lot to chew on there, but I thought that was interesting.
That's fun. That would have been pretty cool.
I wouldn't have been against it.
Both
ways are fine by me, but I kind of thought, why not? Anyway, we did touch on this earlier too, but I wanted to talk about a little bit more in depth your undrafted piece, Luke, that you did, because it's like you said. I think you put it the best way possible. It's really like the prime example of why our sites are different than other sites, just taking different angles and providing different stories. So if you wanted to kind of explain your mission with that and kind of who you talk to and all that jazz.
Yeah, I think the main gist of the piece, and I would love if you went and read it, but the main gist is that most of these rookies, these undrafted guys that you kind of laugh off and say, he won't make the team, they have gone through probably the craziest year of their lives in the last 365 days. They went from their last year to college to declaring for the draft, through a lot of them through the combine or getting snubbed for the combine and having to go to a pro day and, meeting with teams and going through this crazy, flying around the country, go to the draft, fall out of the draft, get knocked back to earth. And, most of these guys were stars in high school and college. This is the first time they've been rejected for anything.
Yeah, they've always been the guy.
Yeah, and now they're teams are nah, we don't want you. And it's a super, Trey Matthews, I talked to him about that, and he was like, I've never felt like that before. And it and I never thought I would feel like that. And it's this very humbling experience to then immediately being lifted back up by a team saying, okay, we want you, or going to a rookie mini camp and a team saying, hey, we cut that guy and we want you instead. And that's how Mike Needham, that's what Mike Needham thought he was getting. And with the Cardinals, but he didn't make that team, and then he had to wait for Hercules Mataafa to get hurt to get a chance here. But, it's just this total whirlwind, and now they're finally getting a little bit of stability where they're at least in the same place for a month, and now they're trying to make the team, and these guys are kind of their career where they had all this hope and they were a superstar and the world couldn't take them down, and now they're staring down the barrel of being total long shots. So I told a couple of stories. I told Needham's story. I told Trey Matthews' story, which if you've read the Position Battle series, or the 90-man series, you kind of know the spark notes on these stories. But I also talked to Josh Andrews, who was kind of the success story. He's an undrafted free agent who made the Eagles for 4 straight seasons, even though he never actually got the chance to get out during a game because they never needed him. He was always just a backup and the guy didn't get hurt. So literally just off of training camp and preseasons, made the team 4 years running. So he's kind of the success story, and I kind of asked him, what advice would you give to undrafted free agents? How'd you pull this off? And he seemed really excited to talk about that too.
You got to pay attention to these guys because the Vikings have made it a certain focus in the last few years to really pay attention to it themselves and do better in the undrafted people that they bring into camp and to really take a look at them. You got success stories like Adam Thielen and way back John Randall and other ones, and it's now you can't just write them off as all camp bodies, which is some of them are, but they're not all that way, and it's fascinating to see it, and it's a story I was talking about doing several times myself a while back because I think the Vikings have made strides in this effort, so it was neat that you wrote that up.
Yeah, and these guys, all it takes for these guys to really stand out is you just got to have a lights out practice. I actually thought one of the other guys I covered in the story was Jonathan Wynn. He's a guy from Vanderbilt, defensive end, and I thought he had a really good day on Monday. And I think that's all it takes for you catch the coach's eye, and then suddenly you have a good practice or two. They give you some preseason reps, and if you nail those, suddenly you're looking like Deshaun Bauer, and maybe you make the team.
Yeah, it's fun to watch, no question.
Yeah, now that I'm getting older and I'm 34 now, it's growing up looking at Vikings players, you put them on this pedestal as these gods who are not necessarily human because you idolize them so much, and seeing a lot of these younger guys, for me, it's amazing how just young they are. I mean, it's an obvious statement, but it's just tying into the whole personal side of it. You can kind of see that, these guys are 20 years old and they got all this pressure on them. It's just, in and of itself, that's just so interesting.
I used to gauge myself by when I, following sports and things. They'd say someone's age, and go, shit, I'm older than him.
Yeah, it's crazy.
You're getting old, Joe. You're getting old, buddy.
Tell me about it. With that in mind, though, when it comes to any roster battles, obviously, the team's only been in pads for a couple days. They're not really doing a whole lot of stuff where you can do what Luke said, which is have a lights out practice. At least from the things I've seen, they're doing they're transitioning away from just doing walkthroughs to actually playing, and it's not that easy to really stand out that way. But were there any position battles that you guys were watching? I know the take from last week was that this is I don't remember. I think it was Barrero said it's kind of a boring camp because there is not a lot of competition just because the team is so stacked. But I have a feeling you guys might not agree with that assessment.
I think wasn't it you that talked about Luke, or where did I see this in one of the? Yeah, you said it earlier with Marcus Sherrills and Holton Hill.
Yeah,
that's been a fun one.
Yeah. And to be honest, it's really been interesting to see the one day I was out there with the veterans to see Marcus Sherrills making plays like he has. I mean, he always a big deal in the return game, but to see him making as many plays as I've seen him as cornerback, you know that it's on his mind. And it was funny that Terrence Newman was talking about him after the practice and just singing his praises, saying this guy makes plays. That's why he's here year after year, And he's known as a guy that rarely drops the ball on the punt return, but he was making plays, and I think he had either a big block or a interception or something when we were standing there, Luke, if I recall.
And they announce this week that, correct me if I'm wrong, but that they were going to keep Sherrills on punt returns and put Hughes on kick returns? Wasn't that something Prefer said? Maybe
it is.
Just to start out, or you'd have to think that if it's coming down to those two. Yeah.
Yeah, he kind of said, like, that's what we're going to do, but it's hard to make that declaration before any preseason games. It sounds more like that's the pole position, and then we'll see if that changes as the preseason wears on.
Yeah.
Holton Hill's been a good gunner, too. That's important. He's been a good corner, but he's also been a good gunner.
Yep.
That's a hard. I love Sherrills.
Me too.
Homer. Here's to Homer. Is he in the Big Ten?
Well,
I
I was gonna bring up the Big Ten earlier when you were talking about how great Diggs was, but then you used Trey Waynes as the negative example, so I didn't say anything.
How many did Diggs play in the Big Ten?
Get these SEC corners out of my.
They're garbage. Cut them all. That's how you run a professional football team. Dagnabbit.
I also like the running back 3 battle.
That
really fun.
was my question. Good job, dude. That AI's working.
Wavelength, baby, let's go. I've personally really liked Mike Boone. I think on the drills that they care about, he hasn't been as good as I see him. Although on the pass catching drills, he just looks smooth as butter. Those are really difficult adjustments that receivers have to make. Just they're physically, when you're running out to the flat and you have to turn around to catch a pass, it's physically really hard to do that. It takes a lot of flexibility, and Mike Boone is very smooth at it, way smoother than the other two. But Mac Brown had a really good day yesterday, Tuesday, just running. And in terms of the drills, Rock Thomas and Mac Brown look super, super agile, and Mike Boone looked a little stiffer. So at least I spent a little bit of time watching them just go through the running back drills. So and Mac Brown is way more physical than the other two. So it's a really fun battle royale to watch. I can't wait to see that in the preseason game.
Yeah, Joan, you wrote an article about Dalvin Cook being in pads too that I wanted to touch on. I think the headline was that he was relishing being back in pads, and I know maybe off the air or on the air. I remember last week you said put that knee brace back on. Why not have it, basically, which I agree with. But what was your take on seeing him back? Was he just happy to be back playing football?
Well, if anybody spent any time around me at OTAs or the camp so far, which unfortunately for Luke he had to do, heard me say that I hadn't seen Dalvin Cook take a pass or even run a running play to the left side of the line. I think they were protecting his knee because he would have to plant and cut to go upfield if he took a pass in the flat and head that way. And so I just kept watching it every time. And I wasn't at every practice and all those, in during the OTAs and minicamp, but I was at a lot of them, and I never saw him do it. So I thought it was premeditated, and I was waiting for that to finally happen, and it did on Monday, without a knee brace, and they threw him a pass out and left, and then, as Luke said, there was a second one, and he planted and cut and went upfield. So it's like that for me was a big hurdle with a guy that just had his ACL replaced. That you can put all your body weight and your momentum on that thing, plant it and go. And so he said he was full go. He was excited to be back out there, and you can tell in hearing him speak that there was a lot of relief after that padded practice that he could get out there. And I think Chris Thomason from the St. Paul paper asked him about, the defense is really relishing this, this opportunity to finally get in pads. And he looks at him and goes, we got pads too. So he was basically saying, yeah, we're gonna give some licks as well. It's not just them dishing it out. And so that was nice to see that the offense, just like the defense, likes to get out there and hit. And even though they generally get hit more than they do hit people, but yeah, it was great to see it. It's all these milestones that he's been ticking off as after week 4 with this knee, and he says, what's the next milestone? And he says, opening night. So I don't know how much you'll see him in the games in the preseason because he glossed right over that, and I don't even know if he knows, but I don't even care if we do. I think he's going to be ready, and I just don't think you want to risk anything to happen. Injuries happen, and you can't protect him forever, but give him as much time to build up the strength. And when he talks about the knee, he says it's my new knee. He doesn't even talk like it's an injured knee. He talks like, this is my knee. This is my knee now, and he's ready to go. And that's wonderful to see.
Definitely. There's a lot of exciting stuff going on. Are you guys going to be out there when are you going back home, Luke?
I will be at camp for all the way through Tuesday. Okay. So I've got about a week left, and then I fly out early on Wednesday the 8th.
So do you guys have any, storylines that you've been covering that maybe you're going to write an article about, not to give it too much away, but in the next few days, or was there anything that you wanted to highlight in that regard, Joe or Mr. Braun?
Well, I was out there on Monday, and I'm heading back out there tomorrow, and I might start looking at some of the cornerbacks because there was a lot. Terrence Newman stopped and talked to people, and he was actually very entertaining, and it was fun to listen to him, and he was assessing everybody that's going on back there. And so I think it's going to be a great position battle as things go forward. So I may pay more attention to that in the coming days here.
I got a couple of quotes holstered from a couple of our drafted rookies. So I talked to them. I'm going to try to talk to a couple more drafted rookies tomorrow or over the next day or whatever, and have a story about that. Otherwise, it's just going to be a matter of who I get to talk to and what kind of stories I can find or.
He's a pro already. Goes out there and just see what happens. That way, Luke. I love it.
You're not good at something till you can wing it.
Ooh, I like it. Yeah. So with that, we've kind of breezed through all the topics. This is a quick show for us, which is not necessarily a problem. We have a few new writers I wanted to highlight. If you guys want to go on purplePTSD.com, there's a new piece about DiFilippo from a guy that I know and respect very much. He's actually the world. This is a real thing. He is he has the best mustache in the world. There's the World Mustache Championships. He's on TV all the time.
What in the world?
Yeah, he's famous, and he's writing for us now, and he's got the pretty legit trophy. I saw him on Good Morning America, and I'm like, I know that guy. So then I messaged him on Facebook, and now he's written a really deep dive into DiFilippo. So check that out.
Is it a skull-like mustache?
Okay, I cannot even describe it. I'm super jealous of it because I have the facial hair of a 13-year-old. But you have to see it to believe it. It's in his profile picture. If that doesn't drive you to the article, I don't think anything will.
That's right.
But yes, in the vein of having different types of articles, we're now writing about facial hair. Our offensive coordinator. I'm kidding. That's not what it's about. Check it out. It's really good. There's a few other guys too that are contributing. So it's an embarrassment of riches on both sites, really. I mean, it's been amazing. You guys have been amazing. We're going to be out at camp every single day, even after Luke leaves. So definitely just follow us on social media. We'll be posting every article on Facebook and on Twitter. You'll know how to find us. Purple PTSD Vikings territory. Other than that, check in next week. We'll be covering camp next week as well with hopefully some more, not good news, but I just want an even keel. Nothing big needs to happen during training camp. Knock on wood, sort of stuff. We're just gotta make it through these next few weeks and get into the season sans some sort of injury. So this has been the Purple Journal podcast. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week.